What's up, Broncos fans? I am back here again to do another video. Wanted to make a video this week because this is a big week for the Broncos organization, for the franchise, because we are at the Senior Bowl this week in Mobile, Alabama. Obviously a big week for us, an important week for us, for our coaching staff, for John Elway and our personnel staff, our scouting staff, and getting to know some of these guys and potentially maybe drafting some of these guys that we get to know throughout the week. Practicing and then obviously in the game over the weekend. So this is a big week for the Broncos. I wanted to make a video and touch on some of the prospects that will be on the North roster, which will be coaching, as I mentioned, and some guys that I think could stand out, some guys that maybe you should watch throughout the week, because I do think the practices will be airing throughout the week from now on up until the game, of course, on the weekend, all on NFL Network, so you can watch all these guys, watch our coaching staff. I'm sure they'll interview Vance Joseph, John Elway, and again, multiple prospects from this North roster. Again, that could be future Broncos. Let's get into it. First guy I'm going to talk about is Josh Allen, quarterback out of Wyoming. 6'5", 237 pounds is what he officially weighed in today at the Senior Bowl. This is currently Mel Kiper's projected #1 pick in his most recent mock draft to the Cleveland Browns, so we might not even get a chance to draft him, but getting a chance to really get to know him all week and watch him closely throughout these practices, I definitely think will be a very good thing for the Broncos, even if we don't end up drafting him. But I like Josh Allen. He's a guy that, I'm not sure I would take with the #1 pick personally. I'm not sure he's my favorite quarterback prospect in this draft, but I do see the potential. I mean, you're talking about a guy with the best arm talent in this draft, an enormous arm. He can make all the throws. He honestly reminds me of a more mobile, athletic, a little bit bigger version of Phillip Rivers. Look at what he did last season in Wyoming. He definitely has an accuracy issue. Only completed 56.3% of his passes last season. Had 1,812 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions to go along with 204 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Again, has really nice mobility and athleticism for his size at 6'5", pretty much 240 pounds. A great game in the Idaho Potato Bowl when John Elway actually was there on the sidelines watching him, so that's an interesting development. John Elway already scouted him there. He's going to obviously see him at the Senior Bowl with his coaching staff giving him feedback, obviously getting to know Josh Allen. And Josh Allen was great in that game. He had 154 yards, but 3 touchdowns, 0 picks against Central Michigan, led him to a win. And again, has all the physical talent in the world, but there's really big questions for me about the accuracy. I think there's consistency issues with his ball placement. His decision making, I think, is also a big issue. And I have questions about his ability as a leader. Can he inspire a team? Can he get a team behind him? Again, I think physically he can make all the plays. I think it's a big week for him, more so not on the field but in the interviews and when teams are getting to know him. But I think he definitely can be a franchise quarterback, and I definitely see all the hype and talent. It's well worth it, but I'm really I got a lot of questions again about his ability as a leader, and if his love of the game, and can he really inspire a group of men, a locker room of men, to obviously go out there and play for him and lead them to a championship. I don't know. That kind of concerns me with Josh Allen, but nonetheless is probably arguably the most physically talented quarterback in this draft, and I think he could be in for a big week, and maybe he does fall to 5. He could be interesting there. Next quarterback I'm going to talk about, probably my favorite quarterback in this draft personally, and the guy I believe in a lot. Whether you do or not, that's up to you, but I'm just telling you my opinion. We got Baker Mayfield from Oklahoma. He's 6'1", 220 pounds. I don't think he's officially measured in or weighed in at the Senior Bowl because he got there late due to some family issues. I believe his mother was sick, which is completely understandable. But you're talking about a guy that was the Heisman Trophy winner this year. I believe is the first Heisman Trophy winner to play in the Senior Bowl. Led Oklahoma to the National Football Playoff where they lost to Georgia in the national semifinal in the Rose Bowl, 54-48. Great game, one of the best probably bowl games in recent memories. And the interesting thing about Baker is we apparently requested him to be on our roster, and that came from Phil Savage himself, who I believe is former GM of the Cleveland Browns, director of the Senior Bowl. He said that, so that's very interesting. We already maybe have some very high interest in Baker Mayfield. And I really love this kid, as I mentioned. I think he has all the makings of a franchise quarterback. I think he has that swagger, that it factor, that X factor, charisma, whatever you want to call it. I think he has it. And I think he's such a competitor. I think he's got that junkyard dog in him, and I think he's a guy, unlike Josh Allen, again, I have the questions with him as a leader. I don't really have those questions with Baker Mayfield whatsoever. I think he's a guy that can inspire a locker room. He can be a leader and really set the tone of a team and really change the face of a franchise and the culture of a franchise in a positive manner. I truly believe in that. I know he rubs some people the wrong way with his personality, but personally I think he's a guy that I love his competitiveness. I love his fire, and I think he does. There's something about him. I think he has that it factor, and he's coming off a huge season. Again, won the Heisman Trophy, completed 70.5% of his passes last season for 4,627 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions to go along with 311 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. In the Rose Bowl, played well against Georgia, which was one of the best, I think, defensive teams in the country last season. Just, again, my personal opinion. He went 23 of 35 against them, completing 66% of his passes for 287 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did throw a pick, but also caught a touchdown on a trick play. Again, in a huge game in the Rose Bowl. People were talking all year, he's playing against Big 12 defenses and this and that. First off, he played against TCU, which was a top 10 defensive team all year, lit them up pretty well. And again, I think he kind of answered those questions doing what he did to Georgia. He's been compared to Drew Brees and Russell Wilson. I definitely understand that. I think he has a similar personality to Russell Wilson and similar demeanor. And I think he can do for a team what Russell Wilson has done for the Seahawks. But he kind of reminds me of Fran Tarkenton, who's obviously a former quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. I think he has a very similar style of play as him, and I think Baker's a guy that, again, he is a guy that can thrive when the play breaks down. I think obviously there's going to be concerns with his size and this or that, but I think he's mobile enough to make plays again when a play breaks down, make throws outside the pocket, and he's accurate as all hell. He can make those video game throws. He really does kind of have that backyard football style, but he also has, I think, phenomenal ball placement, maybe the best of any quarterback in this class. Has great touch, and again, maybe doesn't have the biggest arm, but I think has a big enough arm, and really can change the face of a franchise. I would love to see us get him at number 5. I think this is a huge week for him and our franchise, especially if John Elway, our personnel staff, our coaching staff, Vance Joseph, we fall in love with him and his demeanor and the way he kind of carries himself throughout the interviews and practices and depending on the way he plays in the game. I think this could be a big week for him and the starting point of maybe the relationship of him and us. And again, I think he's a huge candidate for us to draft at number 5, and I would be thrilled and ecstatic if we get him. I think he is a franchise quarterback, and regardless if we get him or not, whatever team gets Baker Mayfield, I think is getting a special player and special person. So I can't wait to see what he does this week, and I definitely think you guys should watch out for what he does. And the last quarterback I'm going to talk about, we got Luke Falk out of Washington State, 6'4", 223 pounds, threw 30 touchdowns, 13 interceptions last year, had a great completion percentage of 67%, 3,593 yards as well. There's some mobility concerns with him. He's obviously not a guy that's going to make a whole lot of throws outside the pocket, and when the pocket collapses and the play breaks down, he's not going to do a lot for you. But this is a guy that's a very talented pocket passer. He's got a very quick release. I've heard guys compare him to Kirk Cousins, so that's a hell of a comparison. And he's got a good touch, good size at 6'4", 225. I think he could be a guy if the Broncos maybe add a veteran like Kirk Cousins, ironically, or Josh McCown or someone, Tyrod Taylor along those lines in the offseason and opt to go that route for a quarterback. Luke Falk is a guy maybe in the 2nd, 3rd round, maybe 4th round even. The Broncos could look to target and have him develop under one of those veteran quarterbacks for a couple seasons, and could be a guy down the line that starts for you again if you don't go for a Baker Mayfield or a Josh Allen or a Josh Rosen or Sam Darnold early on in the draft and try to address the quarterback with that number 5 pick. Tyrell Crosby, offensive tackle out of Oregon, 6'5", 320 pounds, has great size for the position. Obviously, could be a first-round talent, so maybe we won't be able to draft him. But maybe if we do trade someone like a Keep Talib, a Demarius Thomas, a C.J. Anderson, and we are active in the trade market and can maybe get a another second-round pick or another late first-round pick, this is a guy that you could potentially draft to come in and start for you at left tackle or right tackle, because of course you already got Garrett Bowles in there at left tackle. Had a great rookie year, but he definitely, I think, could play right tackle as well. But this is a guy that was great last season as a pass protector. Didn't allow a sack in 2017. His teammates and coaches have described him as a guy that has a mean streak on the field. And he also was one of the best run blockers last season and in this class at the tackle position. Is a great character guy, would be a great fit in our locker room, and is a guy that also played right tackle and left tackle at Oregon. So he's well-rounded. He's a great pass protector, great run blocker. Again, is one of the most versatile tackles in this draft and would be a huge addition to our offensive line. Again, our offensive tackle to watch this week, you got Chukwuma Okafor out of Western Michigan, 6'6", 330 pounds. Another guy that could be a first-round talent. I think he's a little more raw than Tyrell Crosby. He's not as well-rounded, but this is a guy that's your prototypical dancing bear, if you've ever heard that term from NFL scouts or analysts. I mean, he's got great footwork, very nimble feet for a guy that's 6'6", 330 pounds. He grew up in Nigeria, has a great story. He used to play soccer, and you can definitely see that in his footwork. Has great lateral agility, again, at that size. But he's a guy that really has to work on his strength. He gets beat a lot and kind of bullied a lot for his size, which is not something you like to see. You want to see him be more physical, be better in the run game. Again, he's a very raw prospect, but you like his ability as an athlete at his size. Again, great feet. And he'd be a guy maybe, again, in that later first round, maybe second round that you look at taking, and he comes in and plays right tackle for you and you try to develop. I think he could be a very interesting guy to watch this week. And then the last offensive lineman I'm going to talk about, you got Will Hernandez, offensive guard out of UTEP, 6'3", 330 pounds. Again, great size for that position, consistent, great run blocker. I think he would definitely upgrade the run game immediately for us, which was obviously inconsistent last year. We definitely had some big games, but I think it's an area we can improve. Offensive line took a step forward last year, but it needs to take even more of a step forward this year, and I think this is a guy that would immediately improve our run game, has very strong hands, and is a guy that would add more physicality to the offensive line, and again, kind of continue with that culture that we created last year with drafting Garrett Bowles, who obviously added some physicality and a little more nastiness to our offensive line. Will Hernandez would do that as well, and you put him inside next to Max Garcia and Matt Paradis with Garrett Bowles, you're going to be a hell of, I think, a run blocking team. So he's a guy, maybe third round, again second round, we could look at as well. I'll get into some of the skill position guys on the offensive side of the football. This first guy is a guy that I think is definitely heavily predicated on the fact that we draft Baker Mayfield potentially at number 5, or if you trade out of number 5, if another team wants to trade up and get one of those other quarterbacks, or if Saquon Barkley falls, or one of these defensive prospects like Bradley Chubb or Minka Fitzpatrick falls to number 5, and you trade down a couple slots and Baker Mayfield falls and you draft him, this is a guy that I think would be a great addition to your team to not only help Baker in his rookie year, but also I think just would help your offense as well. Add another playmaker at a sneaky position. You got Dimitri Flowers, fullback out of Oklahoma, 6'2", 247 pounds. I think he would be, again, a nice addition, again, if you draft Baker Mayfield. Last year, had 26 catches for 464 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's a hell of a receiving line for a fullback, and has had 9 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Again, has that kind of familiarity with Baker Mayfield, and would be a guy that would be a security blanket for him, and be a guy that's obviously his former teammate, help him transition at the next level. Again, if you draft Mayfield, I like him, and him and Andy Janovich, that'd give you a nice 1-2 punch at the fullback position. You got this guy I'm going to talk about. You got Jaleel Scott, wide receiver out of New Mexico State. This is a kid that could be really special. Definitely could be a number 1 wideout, I think, at the next level. 6'5", 216 pounds, great size for the wide receiver position. Obviously, had a huge season last year for the Aggies at New Mexico State. 76 catches, 1,079 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is your prototypical height, weight, speed guy. Incredible body control and ability to locate the ball at its highest point, which is obviously what you want to see out of receivers, but especially big receivers. And because he can do that, he obviously has excellent jump ball ability. He's a huge red zone weapon that you could utilize. And he's obviously got a great catch radius, being 6'5". He's also got phenomenal speed at his size, and he's a solid route runner. He really is a total package as a wide receiver, I think, but again also has that great height, weight, and speed. But he is a guy that could get stronger. He's a little thin, but 6'5", 216, still has great size, and would be a hell of an addition to our offense, especially if we had a young quarterback. The next guy that I'm going to talk about, I love this guy a lot. I think he's a sleeper. Could be one of the gems of this draft coming up. You got Kalyn Ballard, running back out of Arizona State, 6'2", 222 pounds, bigger back. He's a guy that I think is a potential 3-down back at the next level. I know this is going to be a lofty comparison, but he reminds me a little bit of Le'Veon Bell. And I think due to his size and his ability, again, to be a 3-down back and kind of do it all, his ability to catch the ball, he's got great feet like Le'Veon Bell and vision. He's a very patient runner, but he also has a tremendous burst for his size. When he sees that hole and he hits it, again, he's got that great burst and speed for 222-pound back. But he's also a good blocker in pass protection, or if you need him to chip on a defensive end, or you need him to pick up the blitz. I mean, he can do it all, really. He's great at running between the tackles, again, due to his vision, his burst, and his feet, which are great for his size. He's not really great when he has to run to the outside or to get to the edge. That's really not really his game. Again, he's better at running in between the tackles, but again, he's got versatility as a receiver. You can line him up as a wideout. He had 66 catches the last 2 seasons at Arizona State, and he's had 20 rushing touchdowns as well over the last 2 seasons. So he's a guy, 3rd, 4th round, especially if you move on from C.J. Anderson. Even if you don't, he's a guy that could come in and really be I think, hell of a running back for you, especially if you team him up with D'Angelo Henderson. I think their styles really fit well, and I think he can be kind of the Kareem Hunt of this week of the Senior Bowl, and he can, be a gem of this draft. Again, maybe take 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I think Kalyn Ballard is a guy that would be huge for our offense. And the last offense, Colton Gallup, wide receiver out of Colorado State, actually. So you got some home cooking here. 6'1", 198 pounds, solid size for the wide receiver position, but phenomenal production. Last season, 100 catches, 1,413 yards, 7 touchdowns for the CSU Rams. Had a great game against Alabama. Has had 21 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons at CSU. Again, has been highly productive for the Rams and at the wide receiver position. Before that, spent 2 years of JUCO playing in Kansas. But this is a guy that is a very physical receiver who almost likes contact. He embraces contact, has great yard after catch ability, and is a guy that can definitely run through tacklers and run through corners, especially smaller corners. There's some questions about his speed, but I think he's quick enough, and I think he has enough speed at the position to beat guys deep and still be a deep threat. But again, this is a guy I love his toughness. He has no problem going over the middle. He's sure-handed, and he's got good jump ball ability. He's good in the red zone, and if you put him in those jump ball situations, he definitely can win them. He won one against Alabama, as I mentioned, had a good game against them. So he's a guy, maybe again a 3rd, 4th, 5th round, later round pick, could be a wide receiver that you could add, because you definitely need some playmakers. Again, also especially if you add a quarterback. So those are some of the offensive prospects that stand out to me for the Senior Bowl this week, obviously on the North roster that the Broncos will be coaching. So it'll be interesting to see if those guys do have big weeks, and even guys that I didn't mention in this video. It'll be interesting to see what guys stand out and what guys the Broncos end up falling in love with throughout this week, because it's a big week, especially again for the draft process and the evaluation period.